Stephanie, it's a fascinating documentary. I will say you are setting out, correct me if I'm wrong, to fundamentally change how people see money.
Yeah.
That's a big ask. And we got about 7 minutes.
Yeah.
I think a place to start is with MMT, right?
Okay.
MMT, if you can help us define what MMT is, and I think what the narrative you're hoping to get across with MMT. What is the new economic narrative? It's no longer pull yourself up by your bootstraps. What is MMT telling us?
So in economics is widely known as the dismal science, right? Because
you got to get better branding.
Well, that's what MMT is trying to do, better branding. Because, you know, in the dismal science, it's all about scarcity. And we can never have the things that we want because there's always this really intrusive problem, which is how are you going to pay for it? Where is the money going to come from? And the problem is that we treat money like just any other scarce good or service in the economy. And what MMT is doing is saying, hold on a second, we're not on a gold standard anymore. We have this thing called a fiat currency, and it does make people nervous because a fiat currency sort of opens up space, and it's kind of like, wait, is money real after all? And so MMT is an economic framework that tries to have an honest conversation, that talks to people like grown-ups, not insulting people by telling them that you have to treat the government's budget like a household budget and speaking down to people. We want to be honest about the monetary system we have today, the capacities of the government to spend when you have a fiat currency and you're not tying your currency to gold and promising to convert into something that you could run out of, like physical gold. So we're opening up a conversation where there are still limits and you still have to make choices, but we can have an adult conversation about how the government can actually operate its budget when it doesn't face the same kinds of constraints that a household or a business faces.
I mean, I guess by that, I think the big headline with this as well is the way we look at what the deficit means, correct?
Yeah.
Like, I hear deficit, you hear it in the news, you hear every politician talking about it. Deficit equals bad.
Yep.
And the major narrative of MMT, the modern monetary theory, is deficit good, correct?
Every deficit is good for someone in purely financial terms, and I'll tell you why. Because you're right, we use this word and it sounds inherently like something's gone wrong. If somebody's in deficit, there's a problem, right? You don't want to turn on the sporting game and find the announcer saying that your team is going to have to come back and overcome a 7-run deficit if they're going to win the game. It's always a bad thing, right? But actually, if you think about what the government deficit is, it's just the difference between two numbers. That's all it is. So yeah.
What a relief. Well, I guess we'll find that. Is everything fine? Does it mean everything's fine?
It's fine in the sense that it's just a benign mathematical, like it's the difference between two numbers. It's not even higher order math, right? It's just how many dollars the government spends into the economy each year versus how many they take back out, mostly through taxation. So simple math, if they spend $100 into the economy and they only take $90 back out, we label it a government deficit, and somebody records it as a -10 on the government's ledger. What we forget to do is to recognize if they put 100 in and only take 90 out, somebody gets 10. So the government's deficit is matched or mirrored by a financial surplus in some other part of the economy.
Wait, hang on. Okay. So did you guys meet backstage or something? Because what the hell? What is MMT? What's MMT? What does MMT stand for?
You handle it.
So it's modern monetary theory. And so again, the currency, we're not on a gold standard. We're in the modern fiat age.
Okay, what's fiat? What's fiat?
Well,
is it a good car that I should get, or what?
What you're walking around with, if you've got some of this stuff in your wallet, is a tax credit. So those dollar bills that we're walking around with, we think of that as money, right? And we can use it to transact. We can use it to buy and sell things. We can use it to make purchases of goods and services.
And money is good.
It's good to have.
Okay.
Generally, and it's really good to have when you got to pay your taxes, because this is what the government expects us to hand over at the end of the day in payment of taxes.
Money is good. I'm with you so far.
So, But let's do this.
Okay.
What about that government deficit that you just mentioned, right? And I said every government deficit is good for someone. Why? Because it's just a financial deposit into some other part of the economy. The question is, good for whom and good for what? The government can increase its deficit to do things like feed hungry kids, tackle the climate crisis, fix crumbling infrastructure. All of those things are ways to use a government deficit that might have desirable results for people and for the economy.
So money is good. Deficit is good. I'm with you so far. So what's the bad? What's the problem here?
Well, a big part of the problem is the way that we've been taught to think about these things, to try to stamp out deficits, to reduce them, to view them as inherently dangerous. They're not inherently dangerous. And as I just said, they can be used to help us accomplish important goals in the economy.
Okay. So, for example, if I go to Caesar's Palace and I borrow like $200 on my credit card, and I put it on red, and I lose everything, that's good.
That's bad.
Wait, why is that bad then? But doesn't the casino...
It's good for the casino.
Okay. And also, don't go to Caesar's Palace. That's a little gauche. First, it's bad. Maybe go to MGM or just something. But financially, that's bad for him.
But that's bad for you. But the point is to try to figure out and to wrap our heads around what it is we're actually capable of doing, because we're always told that we can't tackle big problems that we face. We can't deal with housing problems or education or climate, infrastructure, Social Security and Medicare always come up, and everybody always says the same thing. We can't afford it. We have this deficit or we have this national debt. Where are you going to find the money to do these things? And so MMT comes in and says, look, it's not about finding the money. The money is created when the government spends. Congress authorizes the spending, and if the votes are there, the money is there. The thing you have to watch out for is inflation. So it isn't as if it's a free lunch, there are no constraints, there are no limits. There are limits, and the limit is inflation. You can't run out of money, but you can run out of things to buy.
I mean, so this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm going nutshell here, your essential argument is we're not bartering back and forth like this is an avatar for gold in our pocket. The government makes money.
Exactly.
They can decide how much money goes out there, right? You pay taxes. They don't need our taxes to fix big problems. They can make big money. It's on them to figure out how to spend it and put it into the economy in a way that can get big things done. And then the private businesses, they're the ones who have the money. The government just has created that situation. And inflation becomes the boundary that they have to act underneath. Correct?
Well done.
Well done.
Wait, what?
Well done. Okay.
Did you read?
Yeah, she's a published author and created a movie, and still assholes won't do the research. But here's the pushback. Here's the pushback to
I'm not memorizing the Wikipedia page.
But here's the argument. Here's what's so compelling. And Ronny is he's a useful idiot in this. And people are scared. I don't know a lot about money. And I think the narratives around money teach me to be afraid of it. It's something that we shouldn't talk about because I don't understand the underpinnings of it. And I think what is compelling about your argument is we can and have, like World War II, have figured out ways in which to create money and fix big problems. We almost need we need a big thing to focus on to get those problems done, correct? To get the narrative around it.
Well, it helps, and COVID was that big thing for a period of time where governments around the world suddenly stopped asking the question, how are we going to pay for it and what are we going to do about this deficit? And they just pulled out, I'll use the phrase, the money bazooka, right? Countries realized that they were going to have to spend a lot of money to shore up people's lives and livelihoods through the pandemic. And so, we spent some $5 trillion just in the first 12 months or so of the pandemic. And I wish that climate was going to be that catalyzing event that kind of forces everybody to have that wake-up moment and realize that we've been focusing on the wrong sorts of problems, that we really can tackle the problem of climate change. We can afford it. We got to watch out for inflation.
Sure. Okay, sure. So you're saying that MMT can be used to solve issues that we claim that we have no money for, by basically the government making money. because that's where money comes from,
Yep.
right? And you're saying, but doesn't that increase inflation inherently if you just keep making money?
Well, no. I mean, the government has run deficits most of my life, with the exception of 4 years during the Clinton administration. The government's budget has been in deficit. Look at a country like Japan. They've had large deficits every single year for the last 30 years or so, and no inflation to show for it. And we hardly had any inflation. Inflation didn't really become a problem until COVID came along and started breaking supply chains, and then wars in Ukraine and food and energy prices and so forth. But you can have large and persistent deficits without having an inflation problem. It's when those deficits collide against the backdrop of constraints in the real economy, where the economy can't keep up and satisfy that demand. And that's what happened in the COVID pandemic and in World War II.
So if it happened in World War II and it happened during the COVID pandemic, where inflation got out of control, when you had basically unlimited spending on one single issue, World War II or COVID, then how can what's the evidence that MMT will work then? If we had two real examples. I'm just joking. I have no idea what I just said, to be honest. Someone just briefed me on that, and I just repeated it.
So the evidence that it works is that MMT is a description of how government finance always operates, whether you have a budget deficit, a budget surplus, or a balanced budget. MMT is at work, providing the explanation. So it isn't about ramping up deficits and running large chronic deficits. You can have a good, healthy economy in some cases with a relatively small deficit, or maybe even with a balanced budget. It depends on a lot of other things. So the evidence that it works is that it's a description, and we think a more honest and accurate description of the monetary system we have and how governments actually pay their bills.
Now, I guess, in theory, how this takes greater effect and affects our lives and gets big things done. Green New Deal, that was a big part of the way in which it would be funded. We need to start looking at money like through an MMT lens, correct? That also presupposes that you do have this paradigm shift that we start to see as a country, as a collective, we start to see the usage of money differently. But getting people to have a cohesive change of mind and the way they see the world seems like an impossibility. From the experiences I've had out on the road and at Thanksgiving.
Well, look.
Like, how much of do we live in a culture where we can experience a paradigm shift, or is that in and of itself an impossibility?
I hope so. I mean, TikTok is there. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We're going to get better. No, but it's stuff like this, right? It's conversations like these that allow people to hear a different perspective. And also, I think, look what the last couple of years, what we've done. In some cases on a bipartisan basis, and in some cases just with Democrats. But you had the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest climate bill we've ever had in the history of our country. We have the Chips and Sciences Act, which big investments in actual productive capacity here in the U.S., and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is repairing roads and bridges and, taking care of our infrastructure. So those are three big packages, which I would argue are just an extension in many ways of what the administration started doing with the COVID spending, and it's just another example of the government being able to mobilize the financial wherewithal to commit to spending money that it doesn't have, because the money comes from the willingness of Congress to say yes. When Congress says yes and writes those bills, the legislation is the set of instructions that goes to the government's bank, the Federal Reserve, and it says, we've committed to making these payments. Your job as our fiscal agent is to carry out all of the payments we've authorized on behalf of the U.S. Treasury. And that is just how government finance works. It's no more complicated than that. But we complicate it with stories about taxes and borrowing and debt and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, the spending is really easy to carry out.
Well, you see, you're a very smart person. You're saying things very calmly.
Thank you.
And everything seems like it's fine. So how do we get to, what can people walk away with, like, if they want to, not be sad when they look at the deficit?
This is always his question.
How do I not be sad? Like, what's the practical application? Because I guess the three of us sat down here and we decided that the deficit is fine and we can. Well, okay then. So we're okay. So,
look.
What's the next step? Why would we actually? Let's say we believe in MMT or. Yeah, MMT. What's the next thing is belief enough? Do I just have to pray to MMT and then what has to happen next? Like, who else
what has to happen next is that the people that we elect to represent us have to go in there and take decisions using the incredible power that they have, called the power of the purse, that they've got to take decisions about whether to fund programs, whether to cut programs, not on the belief that they ought to be operating their budget like a household, but when these decisions come up about Social Security and Medicare, or continuing with the Inflation Reduction Act and staying, in the game on climate change and going even beyond what that legislation did. What I think gives me hope anyway is that we've demonstrated what we're capable of and that we can build on it and not revert back to old ways of thinking about austerity and the need to reduce deficits, because that's when you hammer your economy. That's when people have a lost decade. That's when all of a sudden, the prosperity that is within reach starts to slip through our fingers.
So when the IRS comes for my taxes, I just got to tell them, like, yo, deficit is good. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
You know what you need to do? You need to take some THC or some DMT and let the MMT just wash over you. Let the paradigm shift come to you, Ronny Chieng.
Yeah, I think I'm in it right now.
I think you're in it. Well, Finding the Money will be released in select theaters nationwide and on demand May 3rd. For more information, go to findingmoneyfilm.com. Stephanie Kelton,